Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, preview and review the ones we can, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course that's right, and of course stream for fun. And so today I'm going to be doing the Lords of the Fallen review. This is a final review for the game, but I got to preface this a little bit. I have not completed the game. I have played quite a few hours. I'm probably getting close to 20 some or 30 some hours at this point. I have seen a lot of the game. I've tried different aspects of the game as well. I've also helped other players, so I've been able to see how they play, and I've been able to interact with multiplayer side of it. I've pretty much been able to interact with every aspect of the game, and I've seen enough to actually have an opinion on the subject. Of course, this is just my opinion, but this is in depth. This is going to take a while to get through. So sit back and saddle in, folks, because, yeah, this is going to be quite long. So what I'm going to be going through: the general story, the visuals of the game mechanics, which there's a lot to go through on that one, the bosses in the game, the level design, the enemies, bugs, glitches, and issues that I have with the game, my final verdict, and then the DLC that we're getting. So I got 2 full pages here, tons of writing. I literally spent multiple hours writing this out today and thinking about it. So let's go ahead and dig right in. Of course, you can always follow me at Twitch at Don't Tread on Me. Also on YouTube, where I archive all my streams at Gaming Garbage 22. Like, sub, all that jazz, but what's really going to help me out is that if you like this content, go ahead and share this with other folks too. That's really going to help me. I think the algorithm is kind of pissing in my Cheerios a little bit. Maybe my just stuff sucks, and hey, that's okay. It ain't for everybody. But hey, I do the best I can with what I got. Don't we all? So let's go ahead and dig right in. So Lords of the Fallen. This came out technically by CI Games through a different developer back in 2014. Honestly, I did play that for about an hour and a half. Just could not get into it. I was hoping it was kind of Dark Souls-ish, but it just was not doing it for me. Visually, it wasn't very good. The gameplay wasn't super great. It was hard to get into. There wasn't a ton of the story there. The combat was a little frustrating and just kind of meh. And so now, we've had quite a break. CI Games has created Hexworks in-house, and this is Hexworks' first game. The story is basically leaving off where the first one ended, or taking off where the first one ended. So there's a demigod, a deer, and he's coming back. And there's been sentinels put in place after he was basically gotten rid of or banished or killed the first time to hold him off. But there's been corruption in the land, and a deer's armies are coming back, and they're now plaguing the land. And left unchecked, a deer himself will come back. So this is literally Lord of the Rings, pretty much, of a story with, like, Sauron and his armies of Middle-earth going everywhere, right? And so, yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting. The game visually is set in a medieval time with Gothic themes in the architecture. So we see some of the architectural designs to like 1000 or 1100 AD, all the way forward to like 1400s. So this would be like kind of the medieval dark times. And this fits very, very good with the enemies and kind of this overlaying story. And there's a variety of landscapes too, and that ranges from meadows to woods to swamps to mountains, cliffs and towns. And you can tell when you pass into another area. It's very easy to tell visually, and that's kind of nice. It doesn't feel very much the same. There's variety there, and you have everything too, where the environments are also different, from fog to morning to evening to midday to sunny to some crazy storm going on, or the town's on fire. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. So I think they did a great job of that, and they helped creating an atmosphere in each kind of area that you are in the game, or that you find in the game. Let's see. The game has a quality and performance setting. The quality is in 4K, but the frame rate is really rough in the game for me. So what I have is I have a Series X, and I have a 4K TV at 30 hertz, or 30 frames per second, but I'm definitely not getting 30. I'm getting more like 20 frames, maybe even 15, and it's brutal, folks. I really hate it. It's awful. But so I always have mine on performance mode because I'm getting a pretty good solid 30 frames. Every once in a while, that still drops off some. But yeah, performance mode is great. I've watched some of my captures through the console, and boy, they just look beautiful. The frame rate's really, really nice. So far from what I can tell, the performance setting is definitely the way to play. The game feels and plays very much like Dark Souls. So let's get into the game mechanics on why that is. The leveling up system. You use your points for every level, basically, to put into attributes for your character. This is stamina, health, strength, dexterity, magic, etc. And so depending on what you put in, kind of, affects your character and your play style. The attributes, they can affect armor, projectile weapons, melee weapons, magic, how much you're able to carry without being burdened, etc. This also affects your throwables and your shields. And so it all completely affects your gameplay, just like it does in the Dark Souls or Elden Ring game. So that all is very similar. There's also a whole set of resistances types like poison and death and COVID and whatever else. We're all very similar with that too. The multiplayer is drop in, drop out co-op, and in my opinion, this is better than what From Software has done with Dark Souls and with Elden Ring. This is true drop in, drop out co-op because you can basically come in whenever you want. The host has to go to a vestige or like a site of grace or some checkpoint. Basically, tell the game, hey, I want to call somebody in. And then they can play and do their thing or whatever, and then somebody comes into the game to help them out. And that person, the helper, he stays there until either the helper decides to leave or the host decides to kick him. So even after defeating a boss, you get to hang around. That's really nice. You just get to move right on down the line and help them to explore the next area. And I've loved doing that with people. The most I've been able to do is I probably helped a guy for about an hour and a half, and we kicked a couple of bosses in the face, and I was able to get him to a completely different biome in the game. And then I had to get off because I needed to go to work. And so that was really cool. I really enjoy that aspect of the game. I will say, too, that the way the multiplayer is designed is that there's also no level hindrance. There's no level cap or anything. So let's say you're a host at level 20, and there's not like a level cap of needing to be 10 through 30 for someone to help you. You can have a player that's level 70 come in and help you, but everything is scaled to the host's game. So whether stuff is beefed up for you if you're a lower level, or stuff is nerfed because you're too high of a level. And so I like that too. The game is actually very accommodating in wanting to ensure that many people can play with as many folks as possible that want to have people in their game. And that, in my opinion, is a much better way than what From Software has done with their games. From Software could learn from that. There's also a currency in the system for multiplayer, and so for helping or for invading or whatever, you're able to get basically different types of currencies to be able to go to certain shrines or certain areas or vendors and purchase certain items. Any of these can be consumables, they can be spells, they can be armor pieces or weapons, or just about anything else. But these are specific to the types of shrines. So it is kind of nice to work on those, and I'm actually working toward a set right now. I got a long way to go, folks, because you do need a lot of currency. But I'm going to be able to buy my first piece pretty soon, and I'm going to be able to see what that looks like. The co-op is also cross-platform. And again, they can call you from... Anyone can call you in, and you can be anywhere. Even if you've never been there before, or you're not there in your game, you can still go in someone else's game and be hours or dozens of hours ahead, and you can still help them with a boss you've never seen before. Now, not all of them like that. Once you totally show that you don't know what you're doing with this boss and you get killed, they kick you sometimes. Ask me how I know. And, well, what's nice is that, again, there's really no hindrance with the multiplayer whatsoever. And I really enjoy that. There is only a max of one host and one helper. So that is kind of a bummer. I do feel like some areas would really benefit with 3. Because believe me, there were quite a few times where it's like, for the last half hour or an hour, I'm helping somebody try to get through this area, and there are some areas where there's a lot of enemies, and that can be pretty frustrating. So yeah, you just get one helper to help you, but again, they can be there as long as you want, or as long as they want to be. They can help you with as many bosses without having to disappear, get them called back in. Yeah, it's nice. Honestly, it's built pretty good. The items in the game can be upgraded with enough souls and with the right materials. So you collect vigor, that's what they call the souls in this game, from enemies, and then the upgrade materials are like delirium or delanium, something like that, and they're basically building materials. And once you unlock the blacksmith in the game, which you actually do that pretty early, then you're able to actually start upgrading your weapons and your shields. You don't upgrade your armor, that stays the same, but everything else is upgradable. There's basically 3 types of material to indicate 3 different tiers of weapon upgrades. So once you get past the first tier, then you need the second tier of materials to continue to upgrade and etc. in order to max level your weapon or your shield. Once you upgrade to a certain point, you're also able to unlock rune slots for your weapon or for your shield. And you can find these runes, or even purchase them at a certain point, and then put them on your weapon. And so that's kind of cool. And so this can buff your strength or your dexterity, or maybe add some kind of effect that can help you to beef up your character a little bit in the game. Because there are definitely areas where you are going to need that to be as beefy as possible. Another mechanic in the game that I actually really enjoy is a bilateral plane system in the game. So there's 2 planes of existence overlapping each other in the world. One is living and one is dead. The dead place is called Umbral, and Umbral is more challenging. For me personally, that can be easily distracted. Even the sounds are a little annoying or a little distracting sometimes when I'm in combat. So I don't like being in Umbral that much, if I can help it. But I really like Umbral and how they've designed this, because you have a lantern and you're able to hold up your lantern and see right into Umbral in real time. And so the game is not just processing the real world or the living world, it's also processing Umbral all in real time while you're playing. So if you hold up your lantern and there's an Umbral enemy, Umbral can actually pull you into Umbral, which is kind of cool. There is some risk looking into Umbral, so you don't want to just hold your lantern up indefinitely, otherwise you can get pulled in. And the reason that's important is because if you're in the living world and you die, well, you go straight into Umbral and then you have a chance to come back. But if you're already in Umbral and you die, well, that's it. And so Umbral is a little more risky. It's also more challenging, and I'll get into that in just a second. Let's see. There are different enemy types. So there's the living ones and the dead ones, or the Umbral ones. But once you're in Umbral, you get both. So if you're fighting somebody and a certain enemy and they kill you, well, you go into Umbral at that point, and then that enemy is in there with you in Umbral, along with everything else that's going to spawn around you. And it can actually make the game quite difficult. Let's see. The bosses in the game. Most of the bosses so far, and there's probably been about a dozen that I've fought, are actually pretty easy compared to the environment that they're in. So usually there's an environment, there's certain enemies or certain areas where there's a lot of enemies. You kind of got to fight your way to the boss, right? And then the boss is kind of difficult. Well, in most cases, it doesn't actually feel that way. There isn't kind of a sense of challenge. There's nothing overly difficult to necessarily dodge. Sometimes some enemies can just totally spam areas of attack and there's no way to get away. Like the mini-boss that wears a bell on his head. Boy, he is frustrating as hell. But anyway, most of the enemies that I've fought so far, they've actually been pretty easy. And once you learn their move sets after 2 or 3 tries, if that's necessary, you can kill them. And some of the enemies I've been able to help kill right away. with people that I've helped in their game. And so the bosses are kind of a disappointment. Sometimes you're able to get items from these bosses, and this can unlock new weapons or new abilities, and also new armor that can be acquired. The level design. So the level design of the game as itself is actually pretty good. It's generally guided, just like a Dark Souls game, but there's also branching paths, and there's also secret areas or hidden paths to find. There are shortcuts in the game too that are usually denoted by an elevator or a ladder, so be sure to be on the lookout for those, because you're going to want to be able to access those. But the way the level design is built is that it's also more of a maze, and depending on whether it's dark or foggy or a bunch of enemies or whatever, is that they've actually designed most areas to kind of be a maze where you kind of know where you're supposed to go or the certain paths that you could take. Sometimes it's more focused on one particular path with a lot of enemies, but then there's other areas too, like the swamp, where there's a lot of branching off, and it kind of feels like a maze in there, and I still get lost sometimes, even with all the times that I've helped people in that place. Many areas also have an heavy enemy density, and this can actually be quite frustrating at times, because the enemies can be so dense where you're running out of stamina, you're unable to get away, you're getting killed all the time, you're losing your vigor or your souls. So sometimes it's just better to run and just try to get through and see if you can make it. But too, the issue with that is that enemies that are left behind can follow you for quite some time. And even if you think you've lost them like in Dark Souls games, that's probably not the case in this one, because let me tell you folks, they will follow you. Most of them can't climb up the ladder, which is nice, but still some of them can. So yeah, you really gotta be on your toes and make that decision, or think about it if it's really going to be worth it, because I can't tell you already how many times I've kind of ran by or tried to get past somebody or help someone else in their game, and then the enemies, they follow for hundreds of yards in the game, and I'm getting killed, or my host is getting killed, or whatever, because we're just trying to run through everything. And so it's really kind of a good idea, if you can, to just kind of slowly work your way through, take out an enemy or a couple enemies at a time, and slowly work through the map. Because there's nothing more frustrating than getting killed over something stupid for the 5th time and having to do it for number 6. Eventually, hosts just rage quit. I've seen it happen. Or they boot you and try to get somebody more powerful than them, and to try to help them get through the game. But since the game scales, that really doesn't happen. Let's see. Enemies also have a long range with projectile weapons and spells. So this, I feel like, is a little OP on the enemy side. There's really nothing OP for you, necessarily. But enemies have a very, very long range. So if they're kind of aimed in your direction, they're probably going to see you before you even see them. Until you really start looking deep and start figuring out that there's enemies with crossbows or spells. And the projectiles are actually pretty quick. So can't tell you too how many times already, quite a few, I've been fighting people and then I get an arrow in my calf or something that slows me down for a little bit or staggers me. And then the enemy in front of me is bashing my face in because now I've been staggered or stunned a little bit. And so, yeah, you really got to be aware of your surroundings. This game is going to push you to be as aware as possible and kind of plan moving through the map. Having another player helps, but boy, sometimes it just feels like it doesn't flippin' matter. Let's see. Oh yeah, sometimes the bosses can spam. I almost forgot about that. And then one mechanic I did see in the game too and looked into a little bit is respecking. It is possible in the game, but it is expensive. And you need a particular item that's expensive in order to respec. One thing I don't understand with respecking is that if you do choose to respec, it actually adds all of your leveling you've been doing numerically, and adds it on top of your current level. So like when I did this, I was like level 70. I've added about 20 or 50 levels so far, and with respecking I was now going to be level 120. even though I was just kind of shifting points around. I wasn't adding 50 points, but for whatever reason, the game was telling me I was adding 50 levels. So I didn't actually do it, because I don't want to screw myself over or have them change stuff in the game and wish I hadn't have. So I'm just holding on to that piece of that consumable, and maybe I'll do it in the future. So now we're getting into bugs, glitches, and issues. So again, this is Hexworks' first game, and they've already had 2 patches, so the developers have been hard at work, which is great. But yeah, the 2 patches have already been released just to fix issues with the game. And we also do know that there is future DLC, and I'll get into that at the end. And we'll also have a verdict at the end too. So the combat is janky. So some of the animations snap into place. This can also be a really bad thing, because maybe an enemy is trying to do a particular move. Well, you will snap in front of them so that they can do the animation and rip half your life out, which is really frustrating. Sometimes too, you can be in a wrong area and an animation can trigger that you didn't want on an enemy, or maybe on a lever or something like that. And so then you're doing the animation when you didn't want to, and that's totally, throwing off your entire combat flow and get you killed in the game. Ask me how I know. There's also lag inputs in the game. So what you're actually pushing on the controller is inputted into the game. Well, there's a lag time there, a small one, and then there's a lag time of your character actually going through the animation. And so you kind of have like 2 instances on top of each other where you do have some input lag. And then if you have server lag on top of that, which I shouldn't, I have a 500 megabit line, but believe me, I still have lag sometimes, especially when I'm helping other players. That input lag can be so freaking bad, you can't even hit an enemy. And I've had that before, where I am swinging my sword. I've had 4 attacks in a row on an enemy that was focused on my buddy, and I can't even hit him. And so I actually just left that person's game. I felt bad for him, but it's like, look, dude, I'm not even doing you any favors. I can basically just block and stand there and swing my sword around as if it's a broom and do nothing. So, yes, the input lags can actually be pretty bad, and when they're all stacked together, it can really work against you in the game. The combat also can be pretty frustrating with the hitboxes. Sometimes you really feel like you should connect. There's other times the enemies make a connection that you feel like should have missed. And that's also kind of hit or miss too, in a way. And also there's a hit or miss with actually bouncing off wooden beams or your weapon contacting a wall. And so sometimes your blade, or your tip of your blade, or your mace, or whatever, will pass right through a wall or right next to a beam with no issues. And then as you're continuing to fight or battling with somebody else, you'll think you'll not bounce off of the wall, but you end up doing that anyway. You think you're far enough away, but apparently not. And so, yeah, there needs to be definitely quite a bit refinement with the combat and with the hitboxes, and with where your entire weapon is in relation to other stuff in the game. Because there's been quite a few instances where I've died over stupid crap like that, whether it's been animation issues, lag input problems, or I've been having my sword bounce off of a wall or something, and then, I get absolutely killed. Your character too, or the host that you're helping, can also get stuck on anything from bones, rocks, edges, barrels, boxes, snagging on an invisible part of a wall, tripping over some lantern, even your co-op buddy. So we've also shown that in the streams where Lion and I have been playing, and we have linked together, and our characters literally freaking almost fall right off the cliff or off of a bridge or something. And it's horrible. I mean, it's like you guys link together, both of your bodies, no matter what you're doing for the first couple of seconds, just seem to go in a general direction toward falling off or toward an enemy's blade or something. And that's helped kill us too in the game. And I've also done that with plenty of other hosts as well. And there's almost nothing more frustrating than that, because you stay linked for a while. There's also stability issues with the game. So they have been working on these with these patches, which is nice, but yeah, initially the servers were really janky. So trying to actually connect with people on a multiplayer level was almost impossible. But lately, it's gotten a lot better. Most of the time I'm able to actually connect with the guy, but too, if they also don't have a really good connection, well, you're running off of their connection, and now their connection is running two people's games, and so the connection just kind of freaks out and isn't able to do it, which sucks. And so that's something to be aware of too, is you really kind of need to have a good connection for this, or make sure you just have nothing else running while you're playing the game. Don't have your phone hooked up, don't have your laptop going, your iPad, pod, whatever. Don't have anything else. Just have your console running for the game so you can maximize your bandwidth as much as possible. Or change when you're going to play. Sometimes too, there's just a bunch of people on in your area at 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night or whatever. And yes, those are not the optimal times to play because everybody's using the same tower you are. So sometimes it's better to play earlier or later than when the busiest time is. Yeah, let's see. There's been issues too with staying connected. Sometimes halfway through a game or even in a boss fight, bloop, I lose connection. Or they lose connection, and I'm thinking, what the heck happened? We all get an error message, hey, you lost connection, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, the stability issues they have been working on, but there's still some there, but it is drastically improved. There's also audio issues in the game. So whether I get notifications on my Xbox, or I access the sidebar menu on my Xbox, or even when I'm just trying to connect to co-op, there's kind of like clicking sounds or clattering sounds, and they'll actually stick around for a while in the game, and I'm hearing them through my headset. And just for fun, I took my headset off once and pumped it through my soundbar, and it was coming through my soundbar. So I know it wasn't my controller, I know it wasn't my headset. It's just something in the game where there can kind of be some extra little sounds in the game, and if you're somebody like me, that can be annoying when you're trying to concentrate. Though luckily, that doesn't happen all the time. But generally speaking, if you're playing the game, especially when you're co-oping with somebody, it would be best if you didn't try to really do anything else, or like put the game on standby and open some other application on your console. It's best just to play the game and enjoy it, and just stay focused on that until you're finished. Then, hop into something else. Let's see. Also, the settings did not change initially. So I went through my settings, so did Lion. We changed some stuff, we came back, and everything was back to default. So they have patched this. That's fixed already with the first patch. But yeah, that was an issue too when the game first launched. Also, enemies get stuck. I don't see this as much. Again, thanks to patches. But yeah, sometimes they'll still get stuck, and then you can just cheese them. Which, with some aspects of the game, it's kind of nice. You get a little bit of a break. You can just totally beat some guy's, fat ass, and just move on to the next guy and get killed over there, 100 yards away by somebody else. But at least with that particular enemy, you got a little bit of a shot, and you just got an easy enemy for once. Sometimes the attacks of certain weapons, especially certain weapons, like weapons that lunge you forward, they take you too far on the ground. So literally, you'll be fighting somebody, and you'll lunge like 10, 12 feet, and you will just lunge and attack yourself right off of a cliff or a bridge or something. And that's incredibly frustrating because you busted your can to get that far, fighting for your life against just a couple of enemies, and then you kill yourself. Yeah, that's incredibly annoying. So yeah, they really need to work on fixing that. Some new areas greatly increases enemies' health, their attack power, and their density. So good gal, I've been in an area, leveling up, worked through the boss. Yay! New area for me, and then it's like, okay, the amount of leveling I did, I feel like was basically worthless, or that I didn't even level up enough, because now the enemies have so much more health. They take out so much health. The resistance levels that I have with my armor, or even with my shield, don't really negate that much. And I've had times where I'm just absolutely getting murdered. A nice way is being able to do multiplayer and help people in other games if you can, if you have the connection for it, and just get extra points and keep leveling up. Again, I am not even close to being halfway through the game, and I'm already at like level 75. And so I am busting my ass to to try to get through the game. And even at level 75, I'm dying. I'm not even at the swamp yet, folks. And that's, yeah, again, I don't even think the swamp is halfway through the game. So, yeah. Leveling up really doesn't seem to make a difference. Your armor type doesn't really seem to make a difference. It can make that difference between almost dead and completely dead, probably. Yeah, sometimes just moving into a new area, expect for a tough fight. And adjust to new enemy types and things like that, and just be careful. But yeah, either way, it's going to be a struggle. So we got to talk about enemy density. This is a really big problem in the game, especially in tight areas. So I've been in an area where there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 enemies in a fairly small area where I can kind of run a little Mobius loop or infinity symbol, right, between 2 statues. And there's 9 enemies in there all bumping around, and and I'm staggering on a freaking bush and stuff. I mean, it's brutal, folks, and 2 of the enemies are actually bigger. They're tougher dudes. They got further reach. They got shields. And I just had to try to run through there, and I found a ladder, and I can't wait to bring Lion to that spot, because, dude, brother, if you're listening, that is going to be frustrating for you. And I'm going to tell you where that ladder is, and hopefully you can just get the frick up there. And if I die, whatever. Just keep going. There's a vestige a little further ahead. But yeah, there are some areas in the game that are just absolutely brutal. Again, it's just worth running just to try to find something else, to try to find a save point or whatever, or to get you out of Umbral, and then that makes it worse too. So this area I was talking about with 9 enemies, that's not even in Umbral. That's just the regular living game and enemy placement. Again, most of the enemies are pretty easy to kill, but again, when you got 9 of them and you're by yourself, that is hell. Like, why would you do that to somebody? Even in Elden Ring, there was maybe a max of 6. And, projectile weapon guys are kind of slow, but holy frick, when they're all freaking aggressive all the time and they're just pushing you like mad and you really have nowhere to go, yeah, that's not okay. That's not just challenging, that's flippin' frustrating. So that is one of the fixes that they are working on right now. And also working on balancing PvE and PvP. Is that, yeah, there is kind of some unfair advantages there to the player, and it just makes it so incredibly difficult, it's not even fun sometimes. And you get pretty burned out too. Lion and I are Dark Souls players, but could we play this game for 3 hours straight? Probably not. Probably not. We gotta trade off and be like, alright dude, it's your turn to go in your game and get killed and stuff, and take that burden on for a little bit. And yeah, it is burdening. It does wear you down. And so sometimes with this enemy density, it can make solo impossible. I've even seen this in the swamp. This is one of my least favorite areas, but I've also been called there the most, because yeah, it's such a horrible place. Tight turns, very mazy. It's hard to figure out where you're going. Everything's dark. You get stuck in on lamps and bushes and crap, and then the enemy density is stupid. And then when you're in Umbral, there's even more enemies that spawn on top of that. So if I haven't mentioned that yet, Umbral itself has its own enemies that spawn in over time, and eventually, when your timer runs out, you get enemies that you can't even kill, and they just flat out rape, murder you, power broom you across the floor, and shit on your body, because that is just Umbral. I mean, that is just how they made the game. And I've had some folks where I wish I could scream at the stupid PlayStation player or the PC guy. The Xbox, I try to message him real quick, but it's like, hey man, we're gonna freaking get to that point where our time is out in Umbral and those nasty enemies are coming. We don't want to have to deal with that. So, but anyway, everybody learns on their own time, I guess. Something too, I haven't played enough, haven't been probably to 6 or 7 different areas so far, playing some of the bosses and whatever. There's a lack of enemy variety. So once you learn the attack patterns, most enemies are actually pretty easy, and the challenging part becomes the enemy density problem that we just talked about. And this becomes more frustrating than actually challenging or fun. And so this kind of sucks some of the fun out of the game. Even some of the bosses that you encountered earlier in the game actually become just now beefier enemies, including Ding Dong Guy Lion. He's gonna come back. I can't wait. But yeah, he's probably quite a bit further actually in the game. Where I was looked pretty fancy. But yeah, the bosses are going to be easier, unfortunately, as well. And yeah, they even become just some of the enemies in the game, along with other enemies around you. But unfortunately, yeah, the bosses are easier to deal with, and it's easier than expected. So it's almost like the boss challenge aspect, the challenging aspects of the boss don't seem to match the environment that they're in. The environment can be more challenging, the refinement issues can be more challenging, or the enemy density can be more challenging than the actual boss. And so that is kind of a big letdown for me in the game. And so far, the first boss has been probably the most challenging. I'll be honest. I know I've kind of learned the game a little bit, so there's a little bit of a play bias there. I've learned my weapons, I've learned kind of how the game plays, I've learned the settings that I like, etc. But yeah, the first boss is probably the most challenging so far. And I've probably fought about 10. Yeah. Well, even Ding Dong Man, he was kind of frustrating too, but he was just more spammy than anything. But yeah, the bosses could definitely use a boost. So with the bugs and glitches and stuff, the whole pacing and progression of the game just feels off, as the leveling and upgrading doesn't match the enemy buffs in the new areas that you come to, and the bosses don't match the difficulty of the area that you're in. So the regular enemies seem to get a huge boost, while all the leveling you did kind of feels worthless, and then you get to the boss and they're just kind of a pushover. So that's kind of the general issues that I have with the game. So my final verdict is a D+. This would be like a 68 or 69 out of 100, and I want to give it a C, or I want to give it a B, because the visuals are awesome, the size of the game is nice, the variety of armor and resistances and spells so far, and the melee combat, it's fun. Like, I enjoy it. It's definitely nowhere near the scale of Elden Ring, but it would be like one of the Dark Souls games, like number 1 or number 2. But like, I really enjoy the game. I like the co-op aspects. I think they're better than what From Software did with their games. And I like too the lore and stuff. It's interesting. If you don't care about it, again, you can kind of skip on through, and if you want to know about it, you can. But I enjoy too just kind of like another Dark Souls game. I love medieval games anyway, like Bannerlord or Chivalry. I just like those styles of games. I like the setting. But with the issues, the landscape and mechanics, they remind us of Dark Souls, but the refinement issues are the problem. So it's refinement in co-op, hitboxes, combat animations, stability issues, which they have been improving, level design, coupled with enemy density, and easier than expected bosses. I just cannot give it a C. I can't give it a 70 out of 100 because I know what they're going for, but it wasn't quite executed well. And so far, on Metacritic, this has about a 75 out of 100, both for the professional critics and the user scores. But I gotta give it a little lower than that because some of these refinement issues are just a huge problem. And then when you couple them all together, there are whole sessions where the game is more frustrating than fun. At least with Dark Souls, at least except for those stupid breathing death lizards, those things were annoying. But besides anywhere else in Dark Souls or in Elden Ring, I had a blast, I had a fun time. And I even had fun by myself. Playing little bits by myself, I'm really not having that much fun. I would rather play with somebody, because that really is what makes the game. That's always made it more fun for me. So let's get on to the DLC. We're almost done here. So all of the DLC is going to be free. Frick yeah. I'd love that. It's all going to be free. So what are we going to get? We're going to get 4 new quest lines, and at the end of each quest line, you're going to get a brand new armor set. There's also going to be new boss weapon abilities. There's also going to be 2 new sets of spells, probably one for Umbral and one for Holy or the Living World. There's also going to be a new Grievous Strike, or a Grievous Strikes. I'm not sure what that is. I don't know if that's criticals or like finishing moves, or if that's a whole new game mode. It's not made very clear. There's also going to be modifiers made for New Game Plus to improve New Game Plus. There's also going to be inventory expansions, and there's also going to be split PvE, PvP rebalancing, and then there's also going to be rebinding controls, basically. Rebinding buttons on your controller to different stuff. So right now they don't have that, but they will be adding that with the updates. So we can expect most of this probably by the end of the year, or at least in Q1 of 2024. I do hope they make some more DLC. I would love to pay $20 for a DLC that they do if they just added more to the world or whatever. Again, I really enjoy the game. Multiplayer really makes it for me. But yeah, I gotta give it a D+. I know what they're going for, and I know too it's their first game. If this was a From Software game and they put something like this out, I'd be like, what the frick? I'd be like, what is going on? This is an F. This is a 5 out of 10, or this is a 4 out of 10. Like, I would not expect this level of quality at all. But this is a brand new studio. This is their first game. And honestly, they're doing a pretty good job. And they're getting right into it to fix the game too. And they're listening to the feedback. And boy, we could definitely use more of that. So if you like the content, folks, go ahead and share this with people. Also other videos too. I think the algorithm, as I said, is just kind of pissing my Cheerios a little bit. So go ahead and share with folks that you think would be interested. You can always follow me at Twitch at Don't Tread on Thee. And you can also blah, 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 blah. It's getting late. Find me at Gaming Garbage 22 over on YouTube. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Maybe I'll see you on the field someday. And if not, that's okay. I'll see you on the next one.